Hello guys, today I will explain about a history of love. Are you ready? Let's start. A history of love. Man by nature is a selfish creature. Even in his relationship with others, he tends to focus primarily on himself or at most on his self-colored perception of his value. Love is the endeavor to transcend his intrinsic selfishness and truly related to one we love. To be sensitive to and devoted to his or her needs as an individual, distinct of oneself and one's own state in the relationship. And yet, when the Torah speaks of the mitzvah or divine commandment to love your fellow as yourself, it does so in the context of man's duty to influence and even change the behavior and nature of his fellow man. In Leviticus 19:18-19, the Torah command, "Do not hate your brother in your heart. Repeatedly rebuke your fellow and do not attribute sin to him. Do not take revenge or harbor hatred toward your people, and love your fellow as yourself. I'm God." As the commentaries explain, there are two possible reactions a person can have toward a fellow who has wronged him or who he sees behaving in a morally deviant manner. First, he can despise him in his heart, regarding him as a sinner and perhaps even persecute him for his sins. Second, he can rebuke him in effort to convince him of the folly of his ways and seek to influence him to change them. The path of love, said the Torah, is not to hate your brother in your heart, but to repeatedly rebuke him and seek to better him. Obviously, the desire to influence is consistent with the idea of love. No one would stand by a love one suffer hunger or is threatened by violence, no less so. If one sees someone he loves suffering from spiritual malnutrition or malpractice, he will make every effort to reach out to him, to enlighten him, to offer guidance and assistance. But this aspect of loving behavior carries an inherent paradox. On the one hand, the individual influence and change implies the departure from self and concern with the well-being of the others. On the other hand, it implies a seemingly selfish way of the other, a rejection of other as he is, and a desire to impose one's own perception of what is good for him upon him. And an exploration of the history of humanity, as recounted in the Torah, revealed four figures who personified four different points of reference on the relationship between self and fellow. Each of these individuals was considered the most righteous of his generation. Thus, their lives can be seen to reflect four stages in the spiritual development of humanity. Four stages in the movement from an instinctive selfhood toward the complete negation of self and self-interest in relation to others. The first of these four ascending individuals was Enoch, a great-great-great-great-grandson of Adam. By his time, humanity has abandoned to one cut off their fathers and had succumbed to idolatry and pagan perversity. Only Enoch still walked with God. But Enoch's righteousness was fully selfish. He was preoccupied only with the refinement and perfection of his own spiritual self. Not only did Enoch fail to have a lasting impact on his society, but he was ultimately in danger of being influenced by corrupt behavior. Several generations later, we encounter the righteous man in corrupt generation. Noah, builder of the ark and regenerator of human after the flood. Noah is in instructed to build an ark so that they may survive the flood. Our sage relate that Noah worked on the ark construction for a full 120 years. All this time he called out unto his generation to mend it wise and avoid catastrophe. However, the Zohar criticized Noah for the fact that, despite his effort, he did not pray for the salvation of his generation, unlike Abraham and Moses, who pleaded with God to spare the weak. Noah's involvement with others was limited to his sense of what he ought to do for them, as opposed to the true concern for their well-being. Himself had sufficiently broadened to include the imperative act to the sake of another, recognized that the lack of social conscience is the defect in one's own character, but he fell short of transcending himself to care for others beyond the consideration of his self-righteousness. 10 generations later was born an individual who raised the concept of man division to the welfare of his neighbor to self-hate Abraham, the virtue. He too faced the curve of a pagan world. Indeed, his title, the Hebrew, is associated with the fact that the entire world stood on one side and he stood on the other. The selfishness of Abraham, concern of his value, is demonstrated by his daring intervention of behalf and the wife sinful city of the Sodom Valley. God had decided to destroy the city for these wicked ways. Abraham petitioned God on their behalf, using the strongest terms to demand of God that he spare the cities for the sake of the few righteous individuals they might contain. It behooves you not to do such a thing, he challenged God, to slay the righteous with the weak. Shall the judge of the universe not act justly? Abraham put his whole spiritual integrity at risk for the sake of the most corrupt of sinners. He was prepared to incur God's wrath upon himself, if it pertains to their physical lives, over his own relationship with the Almighty. Abraham feared to over Noah what that his objective in relation to others lay not in releasing the potential of his social self, as was the case with Noah, but in achieving the desired result to transfer their behavior and character, bringing to the light their good and perfect essence, but therein also lies the limitation of Abraham's love. Ultimately, Abraham's kindness had an ulterior motive. True, it was not a personal motive. True, it was a motive that spells the recipient ultimate God and consists with the recipient true self, but it was an ulterior motive nonetheless. Such love and concern for the sake of the potential good that was seized in the other is a love that is tainted, however, minutely with selfishness, one in relating to the other to one fellow, not as one fellow sees himself, but with an eye to one's own vision of him. This allows for a reaction on his part, expressed, unexpressed, or even unconscious, that you don't care for me as I am, only for what you wish to make of me, so you don't really care about me at all. True was only desired to reveal the other essential self, but this is deeper. Still unrealized self, one love failed to address the other as he how explicitly is. Focus instead on one knowledge of what he latently is and what he cannot to make of himself. In contrast, Moses' love of his people was utterly selfless. His was an unconditional love, one that is unassuming of what they ought to be or what they are on a deeper yet unrealized level. He loved them as they were and did everything in his power to satisfy their needs, both material and spiritual. When Moses pleaded with God on behalf of the worshipper of the golden calf, he did not say, "Forgive them because they will repent," or "Forgive them for they carry great potential." Only, "Forgive them, and if you want, arrest me for your Torah." Either you accept the sinner as he is, or put together a nation Torah without me. The effect of Moses' utterly selfless love are eternal. His guidance and leadership of his people yielded a nation both endurance and unbroken continuity to this very day, device all loves of history. Okay guys, that's all about the history of love. I hope you're enjoying what I'm talking about, and thank you for watching. Goodbye.